because 2.6 is actually harder proportions than 2.7. So I want to do 2.7 first because these proportions are pretty easy. Anybody know what a proportion is? That does have something to do with math. Awesome. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, this is being recorded, and I put it on Google Classroom so that you guys can watch and listen to me, when you're bored and have nothing else to do. First of all, what's a ratio? It's a thing. Fantastic. In fact, it's a fraction thing, right? Yeah. Now, a proportion. Gentlemen, Joey, I'll let you talk here as long as you don't disrupt the class. Okay? All right, proportion are two ratios equaling each other. For example, number 1, I have 5 12s, which is a ratio, equals 10 over x, which is another ratio. I have a ratio equal a ratio, so it's a proportion. Cross multiply. Okay, it's actually called cross products, but for decades people have been calling it cross multiply, so that's what we're going to call it. So to cross multiply, I'm going to take 12 times 10 equals 5 times x. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I gotta fix the screws in the manual one. And then just solve for x. Okay, 10 times 12, 120 equals 5x. Divide both sides by the coefficient 5. And I get x equals, let's see, 5 goes in the 20 twice, 5 goes in the 20 4 times. Pretty easy, right? Now, I know a lot of you like to have the x on the left-hand side. I do too. So when you go to cross multiply, do the one with the variable first. 3x equals 2 times 12. So 3x equals 24. Divide by the coefficient 3. X equals 8. Good, Dewey. All right, different ways we can do or name ratios. There's 3 different ways. If you look at the bottom of the page, I have 14 and 15. 14, they actually use the word 2. It's the same thing as a fraction. 144, 2, 18 equals 32, 2a. Then you would just cross multiply and solve. 144a equals 18 times 32. It's way too much for my brain. What's that, Caden? Am I writing too fast?
No.
Okay. $576. Now you could, after you do enough of these, you guys could pretty much do these in the calculator. Yeah, 18 times 32 is 576. I have 576 in the calculator. I know I'm going to be dividing by the coefficient 144. So all I have to do is hit divide by 144 and hit enter, and I get my answer, A equals 4. What's that? I multiplied those. Okay. Multiply 18 and 32. And I multiplied 144 and A. This equals 18 times 32. 576. You look confused too. I skipped a step or two in that one. Let me redo it. So let's do 15. Another way to write division with ratios is a colon. It's the same thing as saying 3 divided by n equals 7 divided by 11. Now, why would you throw stuff in my classroom? I know. Okay, so I'm going to take, Jillian, 7 times n, and then I'll write this one out. 3 times 11, okay, which is 33. Then I'm going to solve for n. I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient n, 7. And you know what? You could leave it as 33/7, or you can give me the decimal, which is 4. 28 gives me 556.6. Questions, comments, concerns? There's still a few of you that haven't taken my test, which I'm really upset about. Yes. Let's do number 19. Because I'll tell you what, our next, maybe not our next section, but in 2 sections, when we do percentages, and they're all word problems. I know. Hang in there with me. I only need about 5 more minutes. 19. Inequality control test. A tester found that 3 integrated circuits out of a random sample of 50 were defective. Now, every year I teach this, I tell my students, put labels on these to keep them straight. Right, Dewey? Yeah. So I've got 3 integrated circuits. So I'm going to abbreviate it, integrated circuits, okay, out of a random sample of 50 were defective. Suppose, now, I'm going to have another fraction, and I'm going to have the same labels. Okay. Integrated circuits over defective. That way, when I read the rest of the word problem, I'll know where to put the variable and the number. Joey, stop. Suppose a factory produces 3,450 of the circuits per week. How many of these are probably defective? Okay, the variable here is the defective, it's the unknown. So that's where my X goes. I don't even have to figure out where that 3450 goes because there's only one spot left. See how that works out with the labels? If you put the labels in there first, it's really easy to set these up. Then cross multiply and solve. 3 times X is going to equal 50 times 3450. And again, if you do this in your calculator, we could do it all in our calculator. Let's see, 3450 times 50. Make sure you hit enter before you divide it by the coefficient 3. And I get 57,500. ¿Comprendes? All right, page 3. They're going to get a little bit harder, just a little bit, because in example 1, I'm not just taking it and multiplying it by a variable. I'm multiplying it by a quantity. So now they're going to get a little longer to solve. So I'm going to take 5 times the quantity x minus 2. Whenever you see two numbers in a numerator or denominator, Ethan, just go ahead and put parentheses around there so you don't make the mistake of not distributing it. Then I have 10 times 4. If you don't put the parentheses, you will forget to distribute that 5. 5 times x, 5x. 5 times minus 2, minus 10. 10 times 4, 40. Solve for x. Add 10 to both sides. And again, if you're still having trouble, use your dotted line. These add up to 0. Bring down your 5x. 40 plus 10, 50. Then divide both sides by the coefficient 5. And you get x equals 10. In example 2, going to do the same thing. Just cross multiply 2d times 10 equals 5 times 9. Solve for d. 2 times 10 is 20. I have my d. 5 times 9, 45. Divide both sides by the coefficient 20. So d. Now, this you're going to be able to simplify. If you don't want to simplify, use your calculator. 45 divided by 20. You can either use a decimal or hit math, enter. I get 9/4. It actually reduces that fraction. I would prefer the fraction, but decimal is not wrong. And the last one I'm doing. Again, I see more than one term in the numerators. I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses around there so I don't make mistakes. Four times the quantity 3x minus 2 equals 8 times the quantity x plus 4. Now I have to distribute on both sides. 4 times 3x. That's right, 12x. 4 times minus 2. Minus 8, good. 8 times x. 8x. And 8 times 4, 32. Okay, let's get our x's on one side and numbers on the other. Subtract 8x, subtract 8x. Please keep your sides separate. I get 4x minus 8 equals 32. And then we're going to add 8 to both sides. What did you say x was? You are so good. 4x equals 40. Divide by the coefficient 4. And x equals 10. Eventually, we're going to get into squares, okay? And of course that happens when we multiply a variable by itself. In example 4, we're going to have y times y. And we have a whole unit on exponents, and so if you might cross a couple of problems like this. 32 times 2. Yeah, it's y squared, right? Y times y is y squared. 2 times 32, 64. Now, to get rid of the power of 2, square root it. Okay? Now, there's a couple of things that happens when you square root. Fortunately, this is a perfect square. This square root is going to cancel out the power of 2. So I get y. This is a perfect square. Fortunately, I get 8. It's 8 times 8. But what happens is we don't know if it's a positive 8 times positive 8 or negative 8 times negative 8. Both come out to 64. Yeah, we use a plus or minus 8. That's actually two answers. We usually normally just put the plus or minus 8 there. I think you're going to come across one, maybe two problems like this. I know on the worksheets. Questions, comments, concerns? You have plenty of work to do for the rest of the class. You shouldn't be